There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes she's been living as a ghost in her own story. And sometimes, that awakening comes through the most dangerous messenger of all, a man who cannot fully choose her. Picture this. You're sitting across from him in a dimly lit restaurant. His wedding ring catches the candlelight as he leans forward, speaking in hushed, urgent tones about how you've awakened something in him he thought was dead. His eyes search your face like he's reading ancient scripture, and for a moment, you feel seen in a way that makes your soul remember what it was like to be alive. But this moment isn't about love. It's not even about you. It's about the mirrors reflecting back truths that both of you have been running from your entire lives. Today, we're going to explore what Carl Jung called the autonomous complexes of the psyche, the unconscious forces that pull us toward people who cannot give us what we need, yet somehow promise us everything we're missing. This isn't another video about married men who cheat. This is about why your soul recognized his before your mind could say no. This is about the archetypal dance between two people caught in the space between who they are and who they're desperate to become. Carl Jung believed that some encounters are written in what he called the collective unconscious, the shared psychological inheritance of humanity. The same patterns that played out in ancient mythology are still playing out in modern coffee shops and hotel lobbies. The same hungers that drove Persephone toward Hades, beauty toward the beast, are still pulsing beneath the surface of contemporary attraction. But here's the dangerous part. When we don't understand these deeper currents, we mistake psychological compulsion for destiny. We confuse projection for recognition. We think we're falling in love when we're actually falling into an ancient trap that has been set for centuries. Let me introduce you to Sarah. She's a composite of hundreds of women whose stories have crossed my path. Women who found themselves inexplicably drawn to unavailable men. Women who couldn't explain the magnetic pull they felt towards someone they knew they should avoid. Sarah was 32 when it happened. Successful, independent, clear about what she wanted in a relationship. But when David walked into her office building's lobby that Tuesday morning, something shifted in the atmosphere. He was married. She learned that within the first 5 minutes. He was also magnetic in a way that bypassed her rational mind entirely. What Sarah didn't know, what most women don't know, is that she was about to become both student and teacher in one of psychology's most complex lessons. She was about to discover that attraction often has very little to do with the person standing in front of us, and everything to do with the parts of ourselves we haven't learned to love yet. Carl Jung spent his entire career mapping these unconscious territories. He discovered that we don't just fall in love with people, we fall in love with the missing pieces of our own psyche that we project onto them. And nowhere is this more dangerous than when we project wholeness onto someone who is themselves fragmented. Today, you'll discover the 4 mirrors that explain why this happens, how to see it clearly, and most importantly, how to step out of the reflection and into your own truth. By the end of this journey, you'll understand that the most profound question isn't whether he'll choose you. It's whether you'll finally choose yourself, not as a reaction to his unavailability, but as a conscious act of psychological integration. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation requires consciousness, and consciousness requires courage. Are you ready to look in the mirror? Sarah discovered this 3 weeks into her connection with David. They were having coffee for the 3rd time. Always coffee, always public places, always conversations that felt like they were dancing around something too powerful to name directly. David leaned back in his chair and said something that stopped her cold. "You remind me of who I used to be before I became this." Carl Jung called this anima projection, but it's far more complex than most people understand. When a married man becomes fixated on another woman, he's not seeing her. He's seeing his own unlived life, wearing her face. David wasn't attracted to Sarah's intelligence, her kindness, or even her beauty, though all of these were real. He was attracted to the feeling of possibility she represented, the version of himself that could still choose differently, the man who hadn't yet closed all the doors. Here's what makes this psychological phenomenon so intoxicating and so dangerous. Carl Jung discovered that we project our unlived potential onto others, especially those who seem to embody what we've sacrificed. David had traded spontaneity for stability, passion for respectability, exploration for security. And when he looked at Sarah, he saw all the roads not taken shimmering like a mirage. But she wasn't those roads. She was just a woman trying to live her own life. The projection mirror operates on 3 levels, and understanding these will save you years of confusion. The personal level. He projects his disowned qualities onto you. If he's suppressed his creativity, you become the fault. Autistic one. If he's buried his emotions, you become the page. Feeling one. If he's denied his freedom, you become liberation itself. The shadow level. He projects everything he's ashamed of wanting. The passion he thinks makes him weak. The vulnerability he believes makes him less of a man. The wildness he's convinced would destroy his carefully constructed life. The archetypal level. This is where it gets mystical and dangerous. He's not just projecting personal qualities. He's projecting the eternal feminine, what Carl Jung called the anima. You become Sophia, the wise woman, Artemis, the untamed huntress, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. Sarah felt this archetypal weight without understanding it. David would look at her with an intensity that felt almost religious. He'd say things like, "You make me remember what it feels like to be alive." Or, "Something about you brings out the real me." These weren't lies, but they weren't about her either. They were about his relationship with his own disowned feminine energy, the part of his psyche that could feel deeply, love freely, choose spontaneously, the part he'd buried under layers of duty and expectation. Here's the crucial insight that separates conscious women from those who get trapped in these dynamics. When a man says you make him feel alive, he's actually confessing that he's been emotionally dead. When he says you bring out his real self, he's admitting he's been living as a fake. When he says you're different from anyone he's ever met, he's revealing how little he's actually seen, including himself. The projection mirror creates a closed loop of illusion. He can't see you clearly because you're being filtered through the lens of his unlived life. And if you're not careful, you'll start seeing yourself through that same lens, mistaking his projections for your essence. This explains why these connections feel so electric, yet so unstable. The chemistry isn't between 2 real people. It's between him and his idealized self, mediated through your presence. You become the screen onto which he projects the movie of who he wishes he could be. Sarah began to notice something unsettling. David was most attracted to her when she expressed qualities that were opposite to his daily life. Her spontaneity fascinated him precisely because his life was completely scheduled. Her emotional openness enchanted him because he lived in emotional lockdown. Her freedom to choose called to him because he felt trapped by his choices. But when she tried to express needs, set boundaries, or show complexity beyond his projections, his interest would dim. Not because she was less worthy, but because she was becoming real. And projection requires the object to remain somewhat mysterious, somewhat perfect, somewhat unattainable. Jung warned that projection is an unconscious process. David genuinely believed his feelings were about Sarah. He would have passed any lie detector test. The unconscious is that convincing, that complete in its delusions. But here's what the projection mirror reveals about you. If you're susceptible to this dynamic, it's because you're carrying your own unlived life, your own disowned power. You're attracted to being seen as the answer to someone's prayers because you haven't yet learned to be the answer to your own. The first step to breaking the spell isn't understanding him better. It's recognizing which of your own qualities you've been projecting onto this connection. What part of yourself are you hoping he'll awaken? What version of yourself do you think he sees that you can't see on your own? Sarah's breakthrough came when she realized she was addicted to feeling like someone's salvation. Not because she was codependent, but because she'd forgotten her own capacity to save herself. The projection mirror shows us this. When we mistake being someone's fantasy for being truly seen, we lose ourselves in the reflection. But when we learn to see through the projection to what's really happening, we can finally step out of the mirror and into our own life. But projection is only the first mirror. The second mirror reveals something even more challenging, what we're hiding from ourselves that makes us vulnerable to these projections in the first place. The shadow mirror is the most uncomfortable to look into because it reflects back the parts of ourselves we've spent years learning to hide. Carl Jung called this the shadow, not evil, but exiled. Not wrong, but unwelcome in the carefully curated version of ourselves we present to the world. Sarah's shadow mirror moment came 6 weeks into her connection with David. She was journaling one night, trying to understand why she couldn't just walk away from something that was clearly going nowhere, when she wrote a line that stopped her cold. Maybe I like being chosen by someone who can't choose me, because it means I never have to risk being fully seen. There it was, the truth her shadow had been whispering all along. Jung understood that we're often attracted to impossible situations, not despite their impossibility, but because of it. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we've deemed unacceptable, including our need to remain safe while feeling special, our desire to be chosen without having to be fully known. Here's what the shadow mirror revealed about Sarah, and what it might reveal about you. She had spent her entire adult life being the easy woman, not sexually, emotionally. She was understanding when others were complicated. She was patient when others were demanding. She was low maintenance when others required care and attention. But the shadow contains the opposite of everything we've learned to be. And Sarah's shadow was hungry, starving, actually, for attention that wasn't earned through being convenient, for desire that wasn't contingent on being agreeable, for being wanted with an intensity that matched her own carefully hidden intensity. The shadow mirror operates through what Jung called compensation. The more we suppress certain qualities, the more powerfully they seek expression through our attractions and choices. Sarah had suppressed her own capacity to be difficult, demanding, inconvenient. So she was magnetically drawn to a situation that was all of those things. David's unavailability wasn't a bug in their connection. It was a feature. It allowed her to experience the thrill of being intensely wanted without having to risk the vulnerability of being fully available in return. She could be passionate without being responsible for the consequences. She could be desired without having to sustain that desire through the mundane realities of actual relationship. This is where the shadow mirror becomes both revealing and liberating. Sarah realized she wasn't just attracted to David, she was attracted to the version of herself that emerged in his presence. With him, she allowed herself to be mysterious, complex, even a little dangerous. She let herself want things without immediately figuring out how to make those wants more palatable to others. But here's the shadow's cruel irony. By choosing someone unavailable, she was still controlling the outcome. She was still managing the risk. She was still, in her own way, being the easy woman, just in more sophisticated clothing. Jung taught that the shadow often contains not just our denied darkness, but our denied light. Sarah's shadow wasn't just her capacity for selfishness or manipulation. It was her capacity for full, uncompromising self-expression. Her right to be seen completely and loved anyway. Her permission to take up space without apology. The shadow mirror asks brutal questions. What if you're not the victim of his unavailability, but its co-creator? What if you chose this situation because it allows you to experience passion without risking real intimacy? What if being the other woman lets you be the other version of yourself, the one you've been afraid to be in daylight? For Sarah, the revelation was devastating and freeing simultaneously. She realized she had been using David's marriage as emotional training wheels. She could practice being fully herself with someone who couldn't demand consistency or follow-through. She could explore her own depths without having to integrate those discoveries into a real, everyday relationship. But the shadow mirror also revealed her power. All the qualities she'd been expressing in secret, her intensity, her emotional intelligence, her capacity for depth. These weren't wrong. They weren't too much. They were gifts she'd been hiding from available men who might actually celebrate them. The shadow mirror shows us that we often create complex emotional situations to avoid simple emotional truths. Sarah didn't need a married man to awaken her depth. She needed permission to bring that depth into the light of day. She didn't need unavailable love to feel special. She needed to stop making herself so available that she forgot her own worth. Jung believed that integration of the shadow was essential for psychological wholeness. For Sarah, this meant acknowledging that she had participated in creating a situation that felt safe because it couldn't fully succeed. She had to own her attraction to emotional intensity without emotional responsibility. The most powerful moment came when Sarah asked herself, "Oh, what would change if I brought this version of myself into the available world?" What if she let herself be magnetic, mysterious, and demanding with men who could actually respond? What if she stopped using unavailability as a way to avoid the scarier prospect of being truly chosen? This is what the shadow mirror ultimately reveals. We're not just attracted to people, we're attracted to versions of ourselves that we think only certain people can unlock. But the key was never in someone else's pocket. It was always in the parts of ourselves we decided were too dangerous to own. The third mirror will show us why this particular person appeared at this exact moment in our psychological development. But first, you must be honest about what this mirror is showing you about yourself. The timing mirror is perhaps the most mystical and meaningful. It's the mirror that shows you why this person appeared now, not 6 months ago, not 2 years from now, but at this precise moment in your psychological evolution. Sarah's timing mirror revelation came during what she later called her 3 a.m. reckoning. She was lying awake, unable to sleep, when a pattern suddenly became visible. David had appeared exactly 3 weeks after her father's funeral, exactly 2 months after she'd ended a long-term relationship that felt safe but soulless, exactly at the moment when she was asking the universe who she was supposed to become next. Carl Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence that reveals the hidden intelligence of the unconscious. But timing in Jungian psychology goes deeper than mere coincidence. It operates on what the Greeks called kairos, sacred time, meaningful time, as opposed to chronos, the mechanical ticking of clocks. In kairos time, every encounter is curriculum. Every attraction is assignment. Every person who pulls at your soul appears precisely when your psyche is ready to learn what they have to teach you. Sarah realized that David hadn't appeared randomly. He had emerged during what Jung called a transitional space, that psychological no man's land between who you were and who you're becoming. These spaces are dangerous because they're fertile. They're vulnerable because they're creative. And they attract exactly the energy that will catalyze your next evolution. The timing mirror reveals that we don't just meet people, we magnetize them during specific psychological seasons. Sarah was in her autumn phase, letting go of old versions of herself, questioning everything she thought she wanted, preparing for transformation. David was her winter, the necessary darkness that would ultimately lead to spring. Here's what makes the timing mirror so crucial. Carl Jung discovered that our psyche has its own intelligence, attracting experiences that serve our individuation, our journey toward becoming whole. Sometimes what serves our growth feels like disruption. Sometimes the medicine tastes like poison. Sometimes the teacher appears as a temptation. David's unavailability wasn't a flaw in the timing, it was the point. Sarah needed to learn something about herself that could only be learned through wanting someone she couldn't have. She needed to discover her own intensity, her own capacity for longing, her own ability to choose herself, even when someone else seemed more compelling. The timing mirror operates on 3 levels of meaning. Personal timing. What was happening in your individual life that created the perfect storm for this encounter? Sarah was grieving her father, questioning her career, feeling disconnected from her own aliveness. David appeared precisely when she needed to remember what it felt like to feel deeply again. Developmental timing. What life phase were you in that required this specific lesson? Sarah was transitioning from her good girl phase into something more authentic and complex. She needed a situation that would force her to confront her own shadow and power. Ancestral timing. What generational patterns were ready to be healed or repeated? Sarah's mother had spent her life being the other woman to a series of unavailable men. Sarah's unconscious was either completing this pattern or transforming it, depending on her choices. Jung believed that certain souls incarnate at specific times to heal specific wounds, not just personal wounds, but collective ones. Sarah began to see that her attraction to David wasn't just about her daddy issues or attachment style. It was about learning to love herself fully in a culture that teaches women to love everyone else first. The timing mirror also revealed why available men had felt boring to her. It wasn't because they lacked passion or depth. It was because she wasn't ready for the psychological work that real availability requires. Available love demands that you show up consistently, not just in the moments when intensity makes it easy. Sarah's breakthrough came when she realized that David had appeared to teach her readiness. Not readiness for him, readiness for the kind of love that wouldn't require drama to feel alive. Readiness for partnership that could hold both passion and peace. Readiness to stop using unavailability as emotional entertainment. The timing mirror asks the most important question: what is this situation preparing you for? Because Jung insisted that nothing appears in our lives without purpose. The question isn't why this happened to you. The question is what this is teaching you about what you're becoming. For Sarah, the timing mirror revealed that David was her chrysalis phase, a necessary dissolution of who she thought she was, preparing her for who she was meant to become. She had to learn to hold intensity without losing her center. She had to practice wanting without grasping. She had to discover her own magnetic power without using it to manipulate or control. The timing mirror shows us that some people enter our lives as destinations and others as directions. David was never meant to be her destination. He was meant to be the compass that pointed her toward her own true north. But there's one final mirror, the most important one of all. The mirror that shows you how to integrate everything you've learned into wisdom that transforms not just your romantic life, but your entire relationship with yourself. The integration mirror is where projection becomes self-awareness, shadow becomes power, and timing becomes wisdom. This is where you stop being the character in someone else's psychological drama and become the author of your own story. Sarah's integration moment didn't come with fireworks or dramatic revelation. It came on a quiet Tuesday morning, 8 months after meeting David, 6 weeks after she'd stopped answering his messages. She was making coffee in her kitchen when she realized something extraordinary. She was completely alone, and she felt absolutely whole. Integration in Jungian psychology isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about reclaiming what was always yours. It's about taking back your projections, owning your shadow, honoring your timing, and choosing to live from your authentic center rather than your adaptive strategies. Sarah looked back at her time with David and saw it differently now. She no longer saw it as a mistake or a weakness. She saw it as necessary surgery. Painful, but precise, removing the parts of herself that were preventing true love from taking root. The integration mirror reveals the gifts hidden in every painful pattern. Through David, Sarah had discovered her capacity for intensity without losing her stability. She had learned to want deeply without becoming desperate. She had practiced being magnetic without manipulating. She had experienced being chosen powerfully enough to finally understand what it meant to choose herself. Carl Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. For Sarah, individuation meant integrating the woman who could love with dangerous depth, and the woman who could maintain clear boundaries, the woman who could be wildly passionate, and the woman who could be completely content alone. Here's what the integration mirror taught Sarah about breaking the pattern forever. Reclaim your projections. Stop looking for your missing pieces in other people's lives. The aliveness you saw in him, that was your aliveness, projected. The passion you felt in his presence, that was your passion, awakened. The mystery and depth you experienced, that was your own mystery, finally acknowledged. Integrate your shadow. Own the parts of yourself you've been hiding. Your intensity isn't too much, it's your gift. Your standards aren't too high, they're protecting your energy. Your complexity isn't a burden, it's what makes you irreplaceable. Honor your timing. Trust that everything happens when you're ready to receive its lessons. You weren't ready for available love before because you hadn't learned to be available to yourself. You attracted unavailability to practice staying connected to your own value, regardless of external validation. The integration mirror also revealed the ultimate paradox. The moment Sarah stopped needing someone else to complete her story, she became magnetic in an entirely different way. Not the desperate magnetism of someone looking for salvation, but the natural magnetism of someone who has found her own frequency and is broadcasting from that center. 3 months after her integration, Sarah met someone new. But this time, she noticed the difference immediately. She wasn't trying to merge with him or lose herself in the connection. She wasn't looking for him to awaken parts of herself she couldn't access alone. She was meeting him as a complete person, curious about how their completeness might create something beautiful together. Jung taught that mature love happens between two individuated people, two people who have done the work of becoming whole within themselves. Sarah realized she had never experienced this before, because she had never been whole enough to recognize it. The integration mirror asks the most liberating question of all. What becomes possible when you stop using other people as mirrors and start seeing yourself clearly? When you stop trying to be chosen and start choosing? When you stop looking for your missing pieces and start celebrating your completeness? For Sarah, integration meant rewriting her entire relationship with desire. She learned to want things, including people, without needing them for her survival or identity. She learned to appreciate intensity without becoming addicted to it. She learned to love deeply while remaining rooted in her own worth. The fourth mirror shows us that every relationship that doesn't work out is working perfectly, as a teacher, as medicine, as preparation for what's coming next. David had been Sarah's professor in a course she didn't know she'd enrolled in, Advanced Self-Love, with a specialization in not settling for crumbs. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But he also said something even more powerful. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Sarah's story isn't unique. It's archetypal. It's playing out in coffee shops, in conference rooms, in text message chains, in secret meetings, wherever women are learning the difference between being wanted and being valued, between being chosen and choosing themselves. The four mirrors show us that attraction to unavailable people isn't a character flaw. It's often a growth phase, a necessary part of learning what we really want, what we really value, and who we really are, beneath all the adaptations and strategies we've used to survive. But here's the most important insight. You don't have to keep returning to these mirrors. Once you've seen what they have to show you, once you've integrated their lessons, you can choose relationships that honor your wholeness rather than exploit your wounds. The woman who can see through projection is no longer vulnerable to it. The woman who has integrated her shadow is no longer driven by it. The woman who understands her timing trusts her journey. The woman who chooses integration chooses freedom. As you finish this video and return to your life, Carry this question with you. Which mirror do you most need to look into right now? What is your unconscious trying to teach you through your attractions, your patterns, your timing? And remember Sarah's ultimate discovery. The love you're seeking from someone who can't fully give it is the love you're ready to give yourself. The recognition you're craving from someone who sees you partially is the recognition you're ready to claim completely. The choice you're waiting for him to make is the choice you're ready to make for yourself. Jung's greatest gift to us was the understanding that consciousness transforms everything. You don't have to repeat the patterns. You don't have to settle for half love. You don't have to carry other people's projections or hide your own light. You can choose the kind of love that sees you, chooses you, and celebrates you, starting with your own. The mirrors have shown you everything you need to see. Now it's time to live what you've learned. What did these mirrors reveal to you? Which one hit closest to home? Share your insights in the comments. Your recognition might be the catalyst someone else needs to see their own reflection clearly. And if you're ready to dive deeper into Carl Jung's psychology of love, relationship, and individuation, make sure you're subscribed. Because the journey to wholeness is the most important work any of us will ever do. Until next time, choose yourself first, love yourself fiercely, and trust that the right love will recognize and honor the completeness you've worked so hard to create.